afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Hit Play. I'm Isaac Jimenez. That's James Harding. James! How's it going, man?
It's going good. I love the consistency in your intros.
I know, ever since you brought it up, I've been very self-conscious about it. So I've been trying to keep an even keel with it.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good, man. I'm just messing around. Yeah, good week. Watched some David Fincher movies. Did you happen to watch any new movies that came out besides David Fincher?
Not any new movies, but I saw some movies for the first time. I saw Zero Dark 30 for the first time.
Oh, okay.
Despite the historical inaccuracies, of which it's pretty much the entire movie.
Were you telling me
up until, like, the ending.
Osama didn't do 9/11? Is that what you're telling me?
Didn't do that? No. No. I thought it was a pretty good movie, for sure. I wish I had seen it before we did war movies, because we didn't talk about that type of war movie, one where it's no combat and it's just the behind the scenes stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had seen it beforehand, because I really loved it. It was really interesting, and Jessica Chastain did a very good type of main character. I don't often see main characters who are like that. The only other one I can think of is, and it also happens to be a female character, is Clarice from Silence of the Lambs.
Mm.
It's what's actually really funny? Zero Dark 30 is very similar to Silence of the Lambs in really weird ways. There's a man versus a woman, right?
Yeah.
Clarice versus Lecter, and then there's Jessica Chastain versus Osama bin Laden.
Basically every male in the world, really.
They both, yeah, at least in the CIA.
Yeah.
They both movies end with a house raid. They both end with night vision, right? And they both end with a dead guy. And they both star very smart. I don't mean smart in terms of like generically smart, but like super intelligent kind of smart main characters. And I appreciate that for sure.
Yeah, that movie's almost more of a political thriller than it is a war movie.
Yeah, seriously.
And, I mean, that's kind of the decade at a whole, is like just thrillers. Let's make everything possible a thriller. Let's add
everything is so
elements,
thrilling nowadays.
Everything's suspenseful and anxiety ridden, and we're on the edge of our seats the whole time. So I mean, having a war movie have that kind of twist on it's pretty cool. Probably Jessica Chastain's best performance. Off the top of my head, don't worry. Are you counting that? Are we counting The Help?
No.
Are we counting Interstellar? Is it up there? It's up there. But
she played a supporting role. I wouldn't compare the two. Yeah, this is not Jessica Chastain.
This is not a Jessica Chastain.
Not yet, at least.
We'll make one.
Not yet, at least.
But anyways, before we get into our main feature, so to speak, of the day, some box office stuff. People are probably like, "Oh, why do you guys keep talking about box office stuff?" Because this is when you.
I don't think anyone is saying that, Isaac.
Well, the haters in
everyone
my
listening
imagination are saying that.
At this point, we act like we have more than like 3 people who listen to this. At this point, anybody who listens to this already knows, and they probably themselves check Box Office Mojo.
That's our thing.
Let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah, we basically have a bookmark of All right, technical difficulties once again plague this stream. Sorry about that, folks. What were you saying before we cut out?
I was saying that I have Box Office Mojo open all the time, and I never use the tab.
Basically, I just keep my eyes glued to everything that's about box office. But so moving on, Space Jam 2, I guess. I don't know. It's not really a sequel, but opened up at the box office. 31 million. I keep dropping my pen. 31 million in the theaters. Does that surprise you at all? I think that's a little more
Not bad.
actually than what people were thinking.
It doesn't surprise me, but I think I had said last week that my prediction last week was that it was going to do well in theaters. Um, so it shouldn't surprise me.
Mhm.
But it also is its opening weekend, and 31 million compared to Black Widow is pathetic. Even though it's currently on top of Black Widow right now.
Yeah.
But only that's because Black Widow got cut in like absolute shreds the second weekend.
So, the reason I want to talk about it this week is because Black Widow, a 67% drop, 2/3 drop, which is basically astronomical. Usually, blockbusters like this, they'll drop at 50% on the second weekend and then they'll kind of just gradually peter off. But 2/3 from the opening gross that's kind of not a small number. You can't just scoff at that.
Well, that's true. I remember saying I here's the thing though, as I get my thoughts organized as I talk through them. It's true that I think because we've been talking about how theaters will compete to streaming, but we're definitely have limited ourselves to only talking about releasing movies. I would bet that in the long term, Black Widow might do better on streaming. And the reason why we see that big of a slash between the 2 days or the 2 weekends, I should say, is because people are excited to see movies in theaters. But I think the opening day is going to really take over everything. When it comes to like the second weekend, you're going to get the people who want to see it for cheaper with less people in theater, maybe. But that's going to be few and far between when you can just stay home and watch it on streaming with no one in the theater and just you on your couch. So definitely, I think that amount of drop makes sense.
Yeah, and I think
Feel free to
actually
feel free to be different.
I believe I believe it's like the theater some theater executive or something that's like in charge of theater productions or theater releases and stuff actually came out and was like, no, this is bad because basically what this is showing is streaming is going to take over the box office, because if you can buy it for $30 and have it for basically ever, as long as you have an active Disney Plus subscription, I think more people are going to opt for that, like you said. And we've been saying really since, we started this podcast was like, what is streaming going to do to the box office? And I think for a movie like Black Widow and for a franchise like the MCU to have a big drop like that, I think it just reaffirmed what we kind of suspected of, like, these apps are not going to go anywhere and this method of doing things isn't going anywhere. And it looks like this is our industry from now on, really.
So I have 2 predictions to make based on this. The first prediction is that the time a movie will spend in the theater will drastically drop. I was going to say exponentially, but I don't think it will peter out. I think it will just be like, we'll get to the point in time where a movie will just be in theater for like a week or even, just a week, probably maximum. My second prediction though, is that, opening weekend is going to become a big deal. Like, we'll release it in theaters first and then we'll put it on streaming later. And because of that, business model, the opening day for a movie is going to like be where they put all their marketing effort. Like, see it before it goes on streaming, see it ahead of time, go to the theater.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to start to see. And then that is where you're going to get your $80 million on your opening weekend. And then you'll make up the rest in streaming from then point on. Basically, that's what I'm predicting. This is something I don't expect to happen until like 2 or so years from now. So I don't think we'll see it at all anytime soon. But I feel like that might be the most plausible direction. If that carries on. Because I think when you start making the Avengers, the Endgames and the Infinity Wars, you're probably doing better in theater than you are, or than they didn't even put Infinity War on streaming for like 6 months or something like that, So I don't know if they had Disney Plus back then, so maybe that argument is completely pointless. Nonetheless, my point still stands. That's my prediction. Yeah, that's my predictions. Feel free to contest or agree or move on to the next topic.
You know what I think this is going to kill? I think this all but assures that physical discs are done. I don't think we're going to get Blu-rays and 4Ks and all this other stuff as much anymore. At least later in the decade. I'm not talking about, in the immediate future. Because, if you can buy it for $30, Disney prices all their movies at $25 anyways. So if you can have it $30 opening weekend when it comes out, I'm sure anybody's willing to pay that.
I think... Here's the thing, though. I feel like DVDs are really, and Blu-rays at least, they might turn into a bit like vinyl. You know how vinyl basically completely died out, but then it kind of became a novelty thing? Not to say that the movies themselves are novelties, but when I go to like a Barnes & Noble, I see nothing but Criterion Collection Blu-rays. And that's all foreign films, that's all independent films, that's all older Hollywood films. And I feel like there's the novelty to that isn't going to go away. Because that's why Criterion is basically as big as it is right now, because people want that novelty of, the special Blu-ray for all of these kind of things, And also, you can't, in the same way with like a vinyl, you can get the liner notes and stuff like that. The extra features that you get on DVDs, you can't get that on streaming.
But you could.
Unless you release it separately. You could. Someone's going to figure out how to. I feel like Netflix kind of has...
Netflix already does it now. They have I remember watching The Irishman. They had like a whole, basically roundtable discussion with the the three actors in Scorsese, where they were just basically talking about the behind the scenes. But you could do that like a 4-part series, just behind the scenes stuff like that.
Yeah. And what you could also do if you were Netflix or Disney or what have you, is you could do it as a separate series. Yeah. And then you could also release it like that, But no, I think for me, it's going to be like vinyl, where it's just the people who love it are going to keep it alive.
I'm going to be one of those people.
Because let me tell you, Criterion Blu-rays are... they blow streaming out of the water, let me tell you.
Oh yeah.
Criterion probably.
I've always been, people always tell me like, oh, why do you have so many DVDs? Streaming is the way to go. I'm like, because it looks way, way better on disc versus, streaming.
Yeah.
I just feel like film is meant to be watched on physical discs. Me personally, anyways. But everybody has their own opinions, and there's no right way to watch it.
Yeah, it's the same for me. It's almost the same for like audiobooks. Like I don't mind watching things on streaming. I actually have no problem with that whatsoever. Um, but like I would never listen to an audiobook because I don't know, I care more to own the physical book than to listen to it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure people care more to own the physical movie than to watch it. Just have a quote unquote library online. They prefer to have the physical library in the real world.
It's
Some
also
people just prefer that.
it's also like kind of a flex, you know, like if you're bringing a girl back on a date or something and she walks into your living room,
What?
you know, there's a whole bunch of DVDs. It's like, oh my god, you like Pretty in Pink? I'm like, yeah, I like Pretty in Pink. What's up? Or like, oh my god,
I
you
think the
watch
better
Breakfast at
argument is.
Tiffany's? It's like, yeah, I watch Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Oh,
That's my
man,
movie.
shut up. Shut up. I feel like the better argument is music. Because I don't know about you, but I own like one CD and that's it.
Hmm.
All of my music is just
Streaming.
Spotify. Yeah. And I'm sure I know people who have like massive vinyl collections and CD collections because they just care to own the physical. I think the same is going to go with DVDs and Blu-rays. Yeah, for sure. That's just me though.
Yeah.
I say DVD and Blu-ray, but it's all the same.
Blu-rays, really.
It's physical DVD within the Blu-ray.
CD discs. There we go. That's
Yes, pretty much. No, dude, I think Laserdisc is making a comeback.
VHS is the way to go, and nobody will
Yeah.
lie to me.
All right.
Cool. Let's get into our main topic.
David Fincher.
David
Who is
Fincher.
he?
Who is David Fincher?
Does anybody
Man,
know
one of
who
the,
he
if
is?
not
Has anyone seen a
one of the
photo
more
of him?
iconic filmmakers that we have.
He's a good director.
Doesn't look at all like I thought he would look when I started looking up his IMDb page. Yeah, David Fincher, man. Any opening remarks on David Fincher before we start breaking him down?
He is a good director.
That's a bold take.
And I mean that in a very specific way because David Fincher only directs. You know?
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have a single writer's credit on any of his movies. Which is crazy. He just directs. That's all he does. And when I think of people who, at least when I think of directors who do that job well, your job is to take the camera and put things in frame. Maybe you take into account composition. You take into account, exposition, where things are, how things look. And then you just let it go from there. And I think David Fincher just does that almost better than most other people.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think he's the master of visual storytelling. Yeah. In a day and age when most films are, let's hit you with a million lines of dialogue to
when I
explain
was
what's
thinking
going
about,
on.
why doesn't he like writing his movies? Yeah, seriously.
Fincher is more just, I'm gonna show you what is going on, whether that's through the editing, whether that's through the camera work, whether that's through, composition. Also a master of just not of showing you just enough, but also not everything. And I think that's a really lost art. And we'll get into it later, but I think Seven and The Game do this probably the best of just making you feel your own imagination with what's going on. He's also an extremely, I don't want to say perverse, but I I feel like that's the right word to say. It's a disturbing. He has a disturbing filmography. I didn't realize he directed
So
as many movies as he did, but a lot of those movies are
creepy.
yeah, they're not good. They're not great. I mean, they're great watches, but it's not like let's
Hmm.
get the kids around and put on a bag of popcorn. It's
Yeah,
it's
no.
heavy stuff, man.
Well, you know the he has a quote that everyone likes to quote from him, where he says, quote, "I believe people are perverts. That's the foundation of my career." End quote. Might be a little paraphrasing there, but I was there are so many times in the movies where I was like, this is what he believes, therefore he's either going to show us, he's just going to show us what we want to see, and
Hmm.
he knows that we want to see it. And it's like you said, it's those moments where he holds back, where he doesn't show you, where you're just like, God, what are you doing, my guy? Why? Yeah, no, real for
You
real.
know, it's another good quote of his that I was really. It basically defines his entire filmography, like the quote you said. Uh,
Yeah, what is it?
it says, "I don't know much. I don't know how much movies should entertain. To me, I'm always interested in movies that scar. The thing I love about Jaws is the fact that I've never gone swimming in the ocean again. And every single one of his movies, whatever's going on, makes me want to do the exact opposite. Like Seven, I do not want to move to a big city whatsoever. The Game, I'm never trusting any random credit card company with my information ever, you know?
Yeah, seriously.
The Social Network, I'm
Oh
never
man.
trusting anybody with anything
Yeah,
ever.
Facebook. Yeah.
He's a very
You know,
cynical
there.
filmmaker, and yet it's paid off for him. He's had a wonderful,
Yeah,
wonderful film career.
for sure. Well, you know, the the YouTube channel Every Frame of Painting has a video on David Fincher that I think for most people is really where they begin talking about him. Is how Every Frame of Painting analyzes his style. And something Tony says in that video is he says David Fincher cares about information. He cares about exposition. And what I find is interesting is how that's actually kind of a theme for David Fincher is information. He's really into technology and he's really into how that informs communication or warps it even to some degree.
Hmm.
Um, so even when he's making movies about, we won't talk about this movie today, but movies like The Social Network, which are just about, it's literally a movie about Facebook, but it still is so, he manages to portray communication and information in such a creepy and unsettling way.
Hmm.
Yeah, for sure. But we're not talking about that now, are we? No.
No, no, no. The Social Network,
No.
we're not gonna talk about it today.
Yeah, not today. We are going to start with, so David Fincher has worked across 3 decades so far, at least
Yeah.
directing movies. So we're just going to start with the 90s. He made 4 films in the 90s, correct?
Correct.
Yes. Now, it's interesting to me that you mention how you love him as a visual director and how he is to you the best director at taking into account visual storytelling. Because I also feel that way. And for me, my explanation for that is because David Fincher got his start doing commercials and music
Hmm.
videos, which are just nothing but visual storytelling,
Yeah.
basically. For sure.
Well, his most famous commercial, I think, is the one with I think it's the American Cancer Society, which was a fetus smoking a cigarette. Have you seen that commercial?
I have not, but I don't know if I want to.
I haven't either. And I was thinking about it. I was like, do I want to watch this? And then I was like, you know what? I just watched Seven. I just finished the game. Um, I'm good. I'm good. You know, I don't need to be even more in, in a messed up headspace.
Yeah.
But yeah, just stuff like that where he's just not afraid to tell you to direct what is he thinks about something, or
Oh
you know
yeah.
willing to be so brash and controversial, I think has really helped
Hmm.
him, and those seeds are planted in his commercials and in his music videos.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah. What I think is interesting too is how sometimes, especially with his music videos, he was almost experimental with some of them. Like for me, his my favorite music video from him is Vogue by Madonna. I don't listen to Madonna. I don't even really like the song, but the music video is this black and white
It's a banger.
and it, like playing off of shadow and puppeteering, and it looks so different from everything he's ever done. To the point where when I learned he directed it, I was like, "What? Did he direct it like when he was like super young and didn't have his own style?" It feels weird to watch some of his music videos and be like, he was so experimental with them that I was like, when did he learn how? Because he has such a distinctive style. Everyone knows that he loves those very low lights, dark colors, very slow and patient camera movements. His music videos are almost drastically different.
Yeah, it is an interesting contrast between the two, and yet it would base everything that he does in his career. It's kind of interesting too because he never went to film school. I think he learned. I think he got into film because George Lucas was his neighbor. You know, George Lucas was his neighbor. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Hello.
Where were they neighbors? Where were they neighbors?
In San Anselmo, California.
Well, okay, I thought you were going to give the actual address for a second there.
No, I'm not gonna give out an address.
LMAO. Huh. Interesting. Not bad. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that he did get into directing. Although I'm sure after his directorial debut, he probably wished he had never gotten into directing. That's for sure.
Yeah, I wish this movie was never made.
Okay. I'm going to be honest, it's not that bad.
No, it's
It's
not. No, it's
mediocre
really not.
compared to the other Alien movies,
Yeah,
but it's not that bad.
when you,
No.
in every movie that comes after it, you think this movie's a masterpiece. I think the major issue with this movie, and it's publicly well documented, is the studio was interfered so much. I believe this was a 20th
Mm.
century, yeah, it's 20th Century Fox movie. It is.
Mm.
I mean, it's Exhibit A of what happens when studio interference takes over too much.
Mm-hmm.
I believe there was like
Mm-hmm.
6 or 7 scripts that came out at one point, and it got so bad to the point where I think actors would film a scene, and then they found out the next day that that scene actually was written out of the script. It's like what are we even doing here?
Jeez.
Yeah, David Fincher, it turned him off to directing. I mean, he didn't direct for another 5 years, 3 years, excuse me. He was just kind of done with directing after this movie came out. But
Mm-hmm.
that being said, not the worst movie in the world. I remember hearing a lot about how it doesn't live up to the first two, and so when I watched this, I was a little skeptical. But after watching it, it's not terrible. It's worth a watch, I guess, if you're into the
I wouldn't say it's
xenomorphs
worth
and the
it.
alien
Yeah. I mean, the
universe.
problem is that
If you're like super deep
the
into it,
yeah, I mean, the big problem is that the first movie was just a good horror movie. The second movie was a good action movie. And there was the escalation of you go from just a few people on the ship to an entire army fighting the alien. And then the third movie is just, it goes back to a few people on the ship. And it doesn't live up to the expectations, but it's by no means horrible. I think it's really only worth it if you're a fan of David Fincher. Not even, I think people who like the Alien franchise don't even really care for it that much either. But there are, I don't know if you felt this way, there are moments where, Fincher comes through, where you get, the moments where you're like, okay, this seems like something he would do in other movies as well. Mm-hmm. Right off the bat, the one thing about this movie I hated is how every character speaks in a whisper. For like the first hour of this movie, everyone whispers.
Yeah. That's like that stereotypical drama. What we need to do, like, to make it seem more dramatic, let's just have everybody speak in a whisper.
Yeah. If we talk more quietly, it will be more important what we say.
Yeah. So I guess some context into this movie. Alien 3 came out in 1992, 45 on Rotten Tomatoes, 59 Metascore, 6.5 on IMDb. What was the budget on this bad boy? $60 million budget, $160 in the box office. So kind of a flop. Didn't really make as much money as I guess the studio thought it would make. But I mean, that's what happens when you really have no reason to make it. I feel like Alien 2 kind of just was a good ending. But, Hollywood's going to Hollywood and make movies that don't need to be made.
Yeah, seriously. Oh, well, what can you do? And, I understand some of the problems people have with it because it's just generic at the end of the day, It doesn't really do anything really interesting. It's so generic that the ending to the movie, they shot a different ending after Terminator 2 came out. Because they were like, oh crap, the ending we have is too similar to Terminator 2. We have to do something different. So they shot the whole other ending, and then they were like, nah, let's just keep the original. Who cares?
It's absurd. Yeah, I don't really have much more to say about Alien 3.
There's nothing to say about this movie.
Yeah, it's a very forgettable film. I kind of want my $3 back from Amazon for renting it, but you know what? That's on me. When did you watch this first? When did you first watch this movie?
The game? Oh, 7. For some reason I thought 7, the game was...
No. Alien 3.
When did I first watch Alien 3?
Yeah.
Oh, God. I don't remember. Because I remember being a kid and watching Alien 1 and 2. And then I think I had seen the third one afterwards. But I only vaguely remembered... I barely even remembered the plot of Alien 2, honestly. Some of the scenes.
I just remember blowing stuff up was the main plot of
Yes. Because I loved the first Alien movie when I was a kid. The classic scene everyone remembers is the one where Sigourney Weaver, I don't know how to pronounce her first name, where the xenomorph gets like really close to her face, but then it backs off. I think everyone loves that scene. And then I remember misremembering a conversation in the movie in the mess hall kitchen. But other than that, yeah, no. I mean, it's just not worth it.
No.
I wouldn't recommend it. I
would put this one solidly personally in the D tier.
I'd probably put it in the C tier, which is just average.
That's where we're going to disagree, but that's okay. That's the whole point of having a podcast.
It's down there in the C tier with the prestige.
Whoa! I don't know about that.
Yeah, no, it's not that bad.
All right, man. Let's move on.
What about Seven? When did you
Seven.
first watch Seven?
About 3 days ago, and it is it is a roller coaster.
How much did you know about it beforehand?
I
Because
knew the ending,
everyone
which
knows the big ending spoiler.
yeah, yeah, I knew the ending. And I knew Kevin Spacey was in it, but other than that, I knew
Mm.
very little. But came out in 1995, 82 Rotten Tomatoes, 65 Metascore. I don't know how you feel about that. 8.6
What was your
on
question?
IMDb,
Oh, you didn't
65
ask
on
a question.
Metascore. No, no, I asked. I said I don't know how you feel about 65 on a Metacritic.
Okay. I think part of that is just people going back and being like, maybe this wasn't as good as I thought it was.
Hmm. $33 $33 million budget, gross $327 million. Kind of a big hit.
Not that bad. Yeah, for sure.
Nominated for best film editing, didn't win. Wasn't nominated for best director or best film. Um,
Makes
interesting,
sense.
interesting decision. I think, but
Well,
it is
it's
also
also
a
like,
very disturbing film. So I don't
yeah,
think the Academy was fully comfortable giving out awards to
yeah.
disturbing films. They're still not to a degree, but when's the first time you
Was
watched this
you?
movie?
That's a good question.
It's been a while.
I think I had only seen bits and pieces of it. I don't think I'd ever
Mm.
seen it all the way through, actually. Because I knew the ending spoiler, but I
Mhm.
know I had never seen the ending in full. Um, so I think I'd only seen snatches of it here and there. I remember the first murder, gluttony, and the dining scene between Morgan Freeman and the family. Um, but the first thing I want to say about this movie is how much of a upgrade, a visual upgrade, this is compared to Alien 3.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna.
This It's like David Fincher knew this was the kind of movie he wanted to direct, and he was like, "This is just what I'm comfortable doing." More so than a science fiction film, for sure.
Yeah, he didn't want to direct ever again, and then he read this script and was like, "All right, shit, I got to direct again." And this is a very, very good following to his debut. Um, it's kind of like Nolan with Memento, where he had this kind of mediocre first film, and then he just came out with an absolute banger that defined the rest of his
Yeah.
career. Uh,
He went from Insomnia to Memento. Yeah.
no, following to Memento.
Memento was the second movie. We saw him
Yeah.
for 3 hours, and I don't even remember that fact.
That's
What do I know?
terrible. That's terrible.
How dare I? Okay, let me ask you this.
Let me. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
There is something I absolutely love about David Fincher, and that is he can direct actors. You can take anyone, literally anyone, and put them in a David Fincher directed movie, and they will give you a good performance.
Justin Timberlake.
Justin Timberlake, Tyler Perry in Gone Girl. Absolutely. And maybe it's because I've grown up in the, Mr. and Mrs. Smith era Brad Pitt, where he's just the good looking celebrity and
Yeah.
not the actor.
Yeah.
But going back to these old movies, I'm like, oh my god, this guy can actually act.
Yeah, the '90s were a good run for Brad Pitt. This was like, well, this is the beginning of his run. This is, he had this movie, he had Fight Club, and then he goes on to do what he does in the 2000s. But this, I think, like yeah, like you said, it kind of shows that he has the talent to be a good actor. And even though this movie does suffer from Brad Pittism, I don't think it's super bad compared to his future works.
Yeah.
Uh, I dare say his best performance.
Well, I would disagree, but nonetheless, that's not the point. It is very, very good. Yeah. Um, and I know that David Fincher likes working with him, or at least Brad Pitt likes working with David Fincher,
Yeah, they're really
because
good
this is
friends.
not their. Yeah, I guess they just work well together. I don't know, but yeah, for sure. And of course, Morgan Freeman. He's just amazing in every
You know
movie.
what's
Doesn't
interesting
matter
about these two actors is they are such complete
what.
foils of one another, and yet they play off each other so well. This is, you know, Morgan Freeman is very stoic and calm
Hmm.
and holds a
Hmm.
presence just by
Hmm.
being in a scene.
Himself.
And
Yeah.
Brad Pitt is charismatic. He's a talker. He's very I guess eclectic is the word. Not eclectic, but he's very, spastic, and he's kind of dumb
It's,
in this movie. Well, not kind of. He is dumb. But yet they play off each other so well, and it's kind of cool to have that buddy cop
Mhm.
foibles, and it works phenomenally well for them only
Well,
being
I
together for
think
2.5 hours.
I think so. This is where I really so Alien 3 aside, actually David Fincher has completely disowned Alien 3, so
Yeah.
it's really not fair to compare it to a lot of his other films. At least he doesn't want people to. So from this movie, I will say this is really where I think David Fincher um he gives a lot of trust to his writers. I think to some degree he probably knows that he's just you do what you're good at. He's good at directing, and maybe he doesn't feel he's good at writing. But he really knows storytelling. Um, and definitely, I think there's something in the types of scripts he chooses where he just, I don't know, he understands that. And he understands that he can't do it because I don't know, for him to not have a single writing credit is just insane to me.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of directors, even some directors who aren't writers, will just do rewrites themselves.
Yeah.
But for him to just have that trust in the screenwriter to just say, look, you guys know what you're doing. You're the writers. You're the professionals. Knock yourself out. Do what you want. I just have to be able to imagine what it's going to look like and then do that. So for sure, I think part of his strength as a director is the fact that he knows what scripts work for him and he knows what to look for. Um, you'll notice that he loves character arcs. His characters always have resolved arcs. We and when we talked about our Christopher Nolan episode, we complained a little bit that Nolan just likes flat characters who don't really have much
Yeah.
personality to them. But David Fincher will always give his character a complete, well-rounded arc for sure. And he also really likes those dichotomies. You see that a lot too. He likes people who are opposites of one another. I think we see it in this movie. We'll see it again with Michael Douglas and Sean Penn. And even further beyond, I mean, I can't even really think of a film of his that doesn't have characters who are just opposites of one another.
Mm-hmm.
Other than maybe Alien 3.
I don't know, man. The Xenomorph and Ripley, they're pretty opposite.
Yeah,
One,
maybe. Maybe,
one's
yeah.
humans, one's not.
Whoa, you're right. Are you
You know
calling the
what's cool about this
Xenomorph a
movie?
character? What's cool about this
Oh,
movie?
that's a good point. Well, this is without David Fincher. I don't think this movie is as good as it is and is as interesting as it is because I mean, if you strip away everything that makes this movie David Fincher's movie, if you just look at the script, it's not really anything worth celebrating. It's not a thriller, like a political thriller, or like there's no
Mm.
catch to it or anything that would remotely grab
Mm-hmm.
someone's attention.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it kept me engaged for the 2.5 hour runtime that it have. And this is kind of what David Fincher does. He takes these seemingly mundane narratives. I mean, we'll see it with. I hate to keep referencing Social Network because people think we're going to be talking about it today, but we'll see it with his works like The Social Network, or even like Fight Club or something. Like we're it doesn't seem like there's a lot of depth there, and yet with his visual storytelling, he enhances it even more. Um,
Oh yeah,
I mean, my
for
favorite thing
sure.
about this movie is just the editing, and it's just there's smash cuts,
Mm.
there's how where he puts his actors at, where he frames his actors at. My favorite scene of his that tells so much
Oh yeah.
about the story is
Oh
when
yeah.
they're all arguing in the office with I think it's the chiefs or the lieutenants, whatever office, and Morgan Freeman's
Mm.
like, I'm not taking this, I'm retiring, and Brad Pitt's like, you know what? Yeah, like F him, I'll take it. But the way that scene is shot is so smart because each
Mm.
character isn't in each other's coverage. So it's showing like the disconnect between
Yeah.
the three characters. And then when I
Yeah.
saw that, I was just like, oh my God, that's so
For
smart the
sure.
way he does that. Because it's so easy to shoot a scene like that and just make it 2 shots on either side or even a 3 shot wide.
Hmm.
But him being able to go up close and choosing to go up close just tells us so much about the characters.
Well, that's also part of David Fincher's visual style is just he controls what you see. So he knows what you want to see and
Mm-hmm.
he knows he's in control of how you see it. Which is really just that's the director's job
Yeah.
is what do you have to show the audience and then how are you going to show it to them? He controls the flow of information so well. I think definitely part of what makes this movie work is not just that it's a well-written detective story, but that it's a well-directed detective story because David Fincher understands like how you see what you want. Like there are moments where we don't see important pieces because in some ways he knows we don't have to.
Yeah. Like we don't see any of the
Like
murders.
yeah, we never see them
We just see
happen.
the aftermath.
Um, yeah, and then there's like I remember there's a moment where they find the gluttony kill and Brad Pitt like looks under the table and there's a bucket like he has a reaction to something under the table and he's like it's disgusting you don't want to see it and then we just never see it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
He's planting these images in your head, but doesn't show you the images. So it really leaves each
yeah,
viewer with their own,
yeah,
like Tracy's head. No, we don't see Tracy's head nowadays. If this movie
we
came out,
never see
today, we're
yeah,
Tracy's head is in our laps. It's like Morgan Freeman's pulling her head out of the box, but
yeah.
we don't like we see the blood and we're like, oh shit, and then we don't
We
even see
never
the
see what's
head.
in the box. What's in the
Yeah,
box?
what's in the box? um,
Okay, he gave a good performance up until maybe
yeah,
there's this part where
yeah.
he has this. It's in wide. It's a wide shot, but it's a close up of his face, and he's holding the gun at Kevin Spacey, and I think he like does this motion where he like bends down but then stands back up. He does it like 4 times in a row. I don't know. That was just egregious to me, but nonetheless, nobody even knows what I'm talking about. But yeah, no, for sure. I think that this is just a. I don't know how you feel, but his movies, Fincher's movies, have like a smoothness to how well paced they are.
Hmm.
He is so
Yeah, this
in
movie did not feel
control
two and a half
of.
hours.
Yeah, for sure, and I think that part of that is a combination of the editing as well, for sure. Um, Because Fincher is a really meticulous director, very similar to, well, maybe not similar to Christopher Nolan, but the only other director I could think of is Michael Haneke, who would storyboard his films down to like the last detail just so he could edit them. Like he just knew what to shoot. And I think Fincher is similar. He just knows this is just, there's no random moment where he's like, hey, by the way, let's get coverage of this one thing over here. He's never going to be like that. He just knows exactly what to shoot. And that just helps him control the flow of information so well in his movies. For sure.
Definitely. Let me ask you this. First modern movie that felt like a modern movie?
No. There are movies back in like the 70s that felt like they could have come out today.
Really?
We were just talking about freaking 2001 A Space Odyssey last week.
Yeah, but 2001, it could come out today and it would age very well, but it feels like a 70s movie. You know what I'm saying?
60s, remember?
Whereas,
60s.
or 60s, yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas, when I said it's aged well, I didn't mean it doesn't feel like a 60s movie, but it definitely feels like an old movie.
Yeah.
7, I don't feel like it's, what is it, almost 20 years old? 20,
Yeah.
What is that, 21 years? I don't feel like this is a
Well, what's interesting about 7,
I can't do math.
I'll tell you this. Think about this. There is almost no reference to pop culture in 7.
Yeah.
There's nothing that dates it, other than maybe the fact that there's music, like contemporary music, at the beginning and end of the movie. But other than that, Hey, speaking of which, this film technically marks the first collaboration between a certain music artist and David Fincher.
Isn't it
Because the opening credits.
Isn't it 9 Inch Nails?
Yeah, the opening credits is the song "Closer" by 9 Inch Nails.
That's funny.
So he's a big fan. Big fan.
Speaking of the credits, that's why I mentioned is this the first modern movie that feels like a modern movie? Because the credits, we take advantage for it nowadays, but the credits are supposed to set the tone for the film. And it feels almost like this is the first movie that enhances the story via the credits. It's like, as soon as the credits start rolling, we're like, oh shit, we're in for something dirty, and I need to go wash my hands. Every movie nowadays has like a mini story within their credits, but it feels like this was one of the very first. I'm sure there's others prior to it. It just feels like
Pink
this
Panther.
is one of the ones that kind of pop it. Pink Panther. But this just feels like one of the ones that,
it does it well. It does it better than most other
mainstream.
movies.
Yeah,
For sure. No, I get what you're saying.
You have any nitpicks of the film?
For sure.
Because I got a couple, but
What do you have?
oh, maybe I don't. I'm looking at my notes. I can't.
It's just the perfect movie with no problems whatsoever.
Well, do we like Gwyneth Paltrow's character?
Yeah. You know what? Okay, here's what's interesting. My dad told me that at the time this movie came out, Gwyneth Paltrow was like considered the hottest actress, quote unquote, you might say, because she had won the Oscar for Best Actress for the movie Shakespeare in Love. And so she was like, you're an Oscar winning actress now. Every movie you're in is going to be great. So for her to just kind of come in and play a normal mother, role, she's just the housewife pretty much. She has good scenes, especially all of her conversations with Morgan Freeman, the one where they go to the diner too. She's just, in the movie, the character is just a nice lady, But the real kicker was the ending, when it's revealed that it's her head in the box. That was like, hold on, this lady just won the Academy Award. You can't just kill her off like that, my guy.
Well,
we love this lady.
You're missing.
That's what, of course.
I think you're missing.
That's what I was told.
Shakespeare in Love came out in '98.
Did
So this
it?
came out before.
This came in
Yeah,
97,
Shakespeare.
didn't it?
No, this came out in 95.
Oh, it did come out. Wait,
Yeah.
did she win
No, she wasn't in
the Academy
anything big
Award
prior to this year.
prior to that?
Her biggest hit
That's
was
hilarious.
Hook in 1991.
Hey man, that's a good movie. Don't make fun of Hook.
But I think this movie kind of just set her up to become this mega giant movie star.
You know what? I think you're right. I think the person who told me that she was a amazing actress was misremembering. That's pretty funny. Maybe this movie then led up to her getting into Shakespeare in Love.
Probably 100%.
And yeah, because why would you not want to go from an incredibly dark detective movie to Shakespeare in Love, of all things? Poor Gwyneth Paltrow. Is she the one who does Goop? Yeah, she is.
The one who does Goop.
Okay, never mind. I don't feel bad about misremembering any of her
I
information.
was gonna say.
By all means.
Well, you know what else is also aged well for this? New Line Cinema. I believe this is their first big hit, like A-list movie. I think prior to that they had done, what was it? Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I think another horror franchise. A Nightmare on Elm Street. There you go.
Yeah.
And this was kind of the first movie that they did where it was like, all right, now we can start doing bigger hits. I mean, they've done Lord of the Rings, they've done Hobbit, Rush Hour movies.
Yeah.
Straight Outta Compton, movies like that where
nice.
There's actual name and talent behind it. But this is the first one that set them up to become a big production studio.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, New Line. And they've remained... Well, they're one of those weird companies where they're like technically independent, but they still do really big budget stuff. Yeah, by all means, they're definitely a good studio. For sure. Man. I don't really have many bad things to say about this movie, I think, other than that one scene with Brad Pitt at the end. It really is just a well-written... It's going to sound like a weird word to use, so no pun intended, but it's a clean movie, I think. I think it's just well-edited, well-directed, well-acted. In the sense that those aspects are not offensive. They're not egregious.
Sure.
Nothing really gets in the way of the story, and I think that is that's good for sure. So if you haven't seen this movie, chances are you already know the spoilers for it, so don't worry about it. But yeah, this is a
even knowing
movie.
the ending, I still enjoyed everything up to the last 10 minutes because once the ending happened, I was like, well, I know what's going to happen. So,
most people know the ending, but there are twists and turns in the film, particularly with Kevin Spacey's character, that we will not reveal. That, if you've never seen it before, you're still going to be like, what the heck is going on here?
Yeah.
By all means. Maybe mentioning that there's twists and turns is a spoiler in itself. So...
Tim, edit that out.
Who knows? All right. You want to move on?
Let's go to the game. 1997.
Game.
70. Or let me ask you, what tier did you want to put 7 in?
Oh, what tier did I put 7 in? I'll put it in A tier. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. All right. The Game. 1997.
1997.
Directed by David Fincher, of all people.
76 on Rotten Tomatoes. 61 on Metacritic. Metacritic does not like David Fincher.
His movies. Yeah.
Yeah. 7.8 on IMDb. A kind of a flop. $70 million budget. $110 million at the box office.
Yeah.
I'm going to start out with this question. Michael Douglas's best film?
Maybe. No, actually.
Sean Penn's best film?
I'm looking at the list of movies he's done. Sean Penn, maybe.
I don't know, man. Fast Times at Ridgemont High, he holds it down.
Well, I mean, Michael Douglas was also. Oh, he was the producer in that movie. Never mind. Never mind.
Deborah Kara Unger's best film,
Who even is that?
The Girl.
Oh, that's her.
Yeah,
Hey,
she
man.
isn't in anything remotely.
Okay, let me ask you this then. Let me ask you this then. David Fincher's best film?
No, no, not at all.
No.
Not at
What do
all.
you like about this movie? Let me start with this. What do you like about it?
Ah, the last 30 minutes, 45 minutes are pretty, in terms of pure thriller, mind-boggling, what's going on stuff. It's pretty good stuff. Michael Douglas
But
is pretty good in this movie. I think he plays a good foil, or Sean Penn and him play have a good foil.
there
Um,
you go. There's your contrast. Two characters who are vastly different from one another.
Once again,
They
yeah.
are they're brothers, but they look nothing alike.
The problem with this movie, there's two big problems for me. Well, let me ask you, what do you like? What is something that you like?
I like how, even though the ending sucked, in my opinion, um, I didn't know what the mystery was the whole time. I didn't
Hmm.
really know. It kept me guessing, is what I'm trying to say. Because saying I didn't know makes it feel like it was confusing. It's not confusing, but like genuinely, there were moments where I was like, "This is getting extreme. What's going to be the point? What is the climax?" I couldn't guess where this movie was going, which I think Michael Douglas ended up saying that what he liked about the movie was he
Yeah.
couldn't guess where it was going.
Hmm.
So there you go. That's the advantage to it. I also think, in terms of what David Fincher does as a director in this movie, I think this is a good example of a bad movie that is made better with good directing. People often ask, like, can a good director save a bad script, or can a good script save a bad director? I think the story in this movie is just not compelling. If I read this, you told me the synopsis, I wouldn't. I had no plans to watch this movie of my own volition outside of this
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Um, but watching it, I think David Fincher, once again, just the way that he shows you just a, just enough to let you know what's going on, but not enough to really, you know, let you know everything. Like, you still have some leeway for imagination as an audience member. That I enjoy, you know. There are things that happen in this movie where I'm like, this doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense, but is it going to get explained to me? And then it gets explained, and I was like, okay, thank God. Good. And then the ending happens, and I'm like, maybe not.
Yeah. Out of the four,
Maybe
out
not.
of the four movies we're talking about today, this is the one you kind of have to suspend disbelief. Um,
Oh, yeah.
Suspend your belief. Excuse me. The most.
Compared to the film with the alien in space, this movie requires the most suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, it does. Well, it's because the secret, society, for those who haven't watched the movie, basically torments this guy, but everybody in his life is in on it. And I don't think that this
Yeah.
day and age that would necessarily uh that's not a thing, this I mean just having Google around, it would be like, well, let's look up this company. And then you would find out what this company is about, and
Yeah,
it just
seriously.
ruins the whole movie.
You
So
know what's funny too is that this is like oddly a precursor to a weird genre of film that I've been seeing. I haven't seen these movies, but there have been movies like what was it called, Truth or Dare, or there was one called Panic Room,
yeah.
or there was another one where it was another game about people who played a simulated game in real life. We're getting a lot of movies like these
Hmm.
recently. I don't feel like we've
Yeah, we
ever
got
really
one with
had films like them in the past.
we got one with what's her face? The girl who would beat up Evan Peters, or not beat up, but abused Evan Peters. think it was like Lily
Uh,
Roberts or something like that. She's in a movie like that too. I'm getting a little off track.
Evan Peters, you have our sympathy.
Yeah, this movie. I don't know, man. The first, and it's so long. Another issue that I had with this movie, the first 45 minutes are just boring. Like
Nerve. That's the movie. It's called Nerve.
Nerve.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, but
Yeah.
the first
Yeah.
45 minutes of this movie, up until he has this, I think like the second or third thing that happens to him in the game,
Mm.
it's just boring,
Boring.
man. Like it was so hard to get through this movie up until that point. I think I actually ended up breaking it up into 2 days just because I was like, I'd rather do something else with my life right now. I'm glad I went back to watch it, but
Yeah.
yeah, those first
I didn't
45
think it
minutes are
was
just
that.
a slog.
Like I was saying, I didn't feel it was boring, but it was definitely like I was saying. I was like, is this going to get explained? Like, why are we being even shown any of this?
Hmm.
The first rule of screenwriting is start your story at the beginning of the story. So, do we have to really see a lot of this part of him? And then, of course, a lot of it comes back at the end, and I'm just kind of like, okay, that makes sense. Like, why do they do so many tests on Michael Douglas? And then it gets explained when she's like, "We need all that information from you
Yeah,
anyway." And I'm like, I didn't even think about that. I'm glad the movie told
yeah.
me
It keeps
'cause I didn't think
it
about
keeps you
that.
guessing.
Yeah,
It's kind of funny though that David
for sure.
Fincher has basically also disowned this movie as well, saying he's not proud of this movie whatsoever. um,
I'm gonna go ahead and assume some of that has to do with the fact that it wasn't very successful
I think a lot of it.
at the
I think a
box
lot of it too
office.
is that third act. He says
Yeah,
he couldn't
no
figure out
doubt
a way to
true.
end it properly. Which I don't know. I kind of like the ending, but I also can see why people don't like the ending.
Okay. To talk about the ending briefly, because I don't care if I spoil this movie for anyone. You're not gonna watch it anyway. Um, the first so this movie does the thing that is really bad to do, and that is you have two twists. One twist is enough. The good thing with a twist ending is that first off, most people either don't anticipate it or they see it coming and it makes them feel smart. Two twists is kind of like, okay, what's the point now anymore?
Yeah,
The assumption is that after the first twist, the character knows their lesson. But then you throw a second twist on top of that, and you're like, do we even need that anymore? Like, he shoots his brother, and you're like, okay, that's dark, but lesson learned, I guess. And then he's saved from suicide, and you're like, okay, do we even need it? Like, it's hard to explain. Just, I agree that I was like, this is too much. This is too much.
yeah, dude.
It's like, he's gonna kill him. He's dead. No, he's alive. I'm like, pick one. Pick one
Yeah, you
already.
think Michael Douglas is going into work perfectly okay on Monday? Probably not. I wouldn't.
Yeah, no, seriously. I can't imagine the trauma that he does not have thanks to this movie coming out in the 90s.
I will say though that the
Over.
last third, up until he jumps off and it's discovered the twist, from like when he gets back from Mexico up until that point, is really really smart filmmaking. Like when he
Yeah,
storms, quote unquote, storms the castle and walks into CRS, and they walk into the
yeah.
commissary, and
That
literally everybody who has interacted with him in the last 3 months is there. I'm like, holy
is
shit! Like,
there.
what is going
Yeah,
on? Is this like the Illuminati or something? What is going on?
that part, that for sure was so
I
cool.
don't ever visibly
I,
go, yo, what the hell? But that when he walks in, I'm like, I literally audibly was like, what the hell is going on?
yeah, no, seriously, that part was so good. Yeah, I agree that that ending is well done. The Mexico part I hate so much
Yeah,
because it's
no, we
such a
could have.
like,
You could have dropped them off in like Sacramento, and we could have had the same
yeah,
effect.
seriously. Yeah.
It didn't need to be Mexico.
No, it didn't even have to happen. I think. But because what I hate about that so much. Okay, I have this rule when it comes to plot development is if you want your story to move forward, your characters can't go backwards physically. Um, that's what I hate about the movie Mad Max Fury Road is the characters literally turn around. Um, and Michael Douglas does that in this movie. He wakes up in Mexico and he has to turn around and go back to San Francisco. And I'm like, you're killing so much momentum by doing that.
Yeah.
Imagine if he wakes up in Mexico or even in Sacramento and he's still being followed by people. Imagine if he's like, hey, now you're here in freaking, Puerto Penasco and it's happy birthday, you're at the beach. I'm like, you could have done just finish the movie in Mexico. That would have been totally fine.
Yeah.
You didn't have to have, MacGyver his way back to America or something like that. Whatever. I hated that so much. That's just a personal nitpick for sure. Even my cat hates it.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Sounds like it does.
Yeah, listen to that. Oh my god. Anyway, but I will say this: it's well directed.
Yeah,
for sure. And I'll also say this: I think this movie is where we get a little bit of something David Fincher would, in the future, in his future movies, really become the staple of his directing. I think we get a little bit more CGI in this movie than we do in Seven or even Alien 3. Yeah, you agree, don't you?
Yeah. Also, the ending. He moves 5 feet to the left or 5 feet to the right. He's actually dead in real life when he jumps off the building. I think that was a big problem. Did you like did you like the 8mm flashback sequences?
So that was really interesting. David Fincher will do this later again in Curious Case of Benjamin Button, using different film for different time. I thought it was fine. Just thought it was a little cool technique,
Mm-hmm.
It's
For me, it was cool the first time.
I will admit,
I was down with it the second time, and then after that, I was just like, all right, we get it.
Well, it's such a trope, like old family footage. I understand why people do that, but it's like I've seen it too many times.
Yeah.
Raging Bull does the same thing, and I'm like, even in that movie, I'm like, okay, I get it. It's home footage. You don't have to make it seem more realistic necessarily. This is already a movie about a guy who gets chased to Mexico by a secret society. Not exactly going for realism all the time now, are we? I think really my biggest nitpicks with this movie is the third act, the whole Mexico sequence, and then I'll admit it, this movie probably has the weakest characters just because it's so focused on Michael Douglas that like Sean Penn shows up 3 times in this whole movie.
Which is interesting because I think when he has a good performance. I think when he's freaking out and they're in the car scene.
Yeah. Maybe I just don't like Sean Penn, but they definitely, here's my issue. They don't look like brothers. They just don't look like brothers.
Well, you know the story about that. Do you know the story about the casting in this movie?
No, what's the story?
So originally it was going to be, they were going to put Jodie Foster.
Huh.
But the problem with that is David Fincher didn't want to put. I think that she was just coming off Silence of the Lambs, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
So they didn't want to put a big actor in that role. And so what they
Hmm.
did was they took. So what happened was they switched her out for Sean Penn and whatever, and they rewrote the character. Well, first
Hmm.
Jodie Foster was gonna be his daughter, and Jodie
Okay,
Foster was like,
that's a little
"That's
bit better.
Jodie Foster didn't like that because they're only 20 years apart."
True. Well, that was my big issue with him and Sean Penn being brothers was the age difference.
Yeah,
I'm
that's a good
like,
point.
was your dad having a kid when he was in his 80s or something like that? Like, why is Sean Penn so much younger than you, my guy? I don't know.
She ended up suing them. Did you know that?
Wait, really? What's funny is
Yeah.
that she later makes a movie with David Fincher.
Yeah, she ended up suing him. So what? Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm misinformed. I'm spreading fake news. Douglas didn't like the
We
idea of her being the daughter, and he changed the character to. He wanted the character to be a sister, but Foster didn't like that.
okay.
He wanted to be her daughter.
We don't
But then
worry.
she
I
couldn't
messed
be
up
in.
Gwyneth Paltrow. You messed up Jodie Foster.
She couldn't be in the movie. David Fincher wasn't really feeling it. Um, they took her out, and then she ended up suing him. So it was supposed to be Jodie Foster and not Sean Penn, which I thought was kind of interesting. I don't think it would have mattered because this film's problems aren't necessarily the characters. The characters aren't great
Yeah.
characters, especially compared to his other works. But I just think that last third is really, really.
Yeah.
The first 45 minutes
For
and the
sure.
last third are rough, which is kind of bad because those are the most important parts of the movie. Like, if you don't get
Yeah.
somebody entertained within the first 30 minutes, you're going to lose them. And if you don't end on a good
Yeah.
note, you're going to leave a bad impression.
Yeah. I can definitely
So,
say though that the general gist of this movie does feel like a David Fincher movie. He likes those kind of psychological rabbit holes.
such a logical
Gone Girl
thrillers.
is a
Yeah.
good example.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So this doesn't feel far fetched for something he would. One of the things that I can definitely say about David Fincher, and maybe this is what I was getting at with I was talking about Seven. He feels like he chooses his movies; that they don't get chosen for
Yeah.
him. And maybe that's part of why he doesn't pick a writer either. Why he doesn't write himself. But this movie still feels like a David Fincher movie. It's just not a good one.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, for sure.
And now moving
For
on
sure.
to the movie that I think
Moving
defines the latter half of the decade.
It came out in 1999.
Yeah.
It's the last year of the decade.
It is every film major's wet dream. Fight Club.
Quite an intro.
I mean, it is though, right? Have you talked to every film
Yeah.
major? And every film major has this in their top 15.
Okay, let me say this.
I'm not saying it's a bad movie. I'm just saying every film major I ever talked to was like, yeah, Fight Club's in my top 15.
All right, so it came out in 1999, based on the novel by Chuck Palahniuk. Came out in 1996. Produced by 20th Century Fox and distributed by Fox as well. Along with Regency, which is also kind of an independent production company. Its budget was around $63 million, but it made back almost $100 million. So that's a very successful movie. Blockbuster, you might even say. Not a blockbuster. No, don't say that. Definitely, though, a cult classic. Even with the successes this movie had, it's such a weird movie. It's such an insular movie, and it's a little esoteric even, that it definitely makes sense, even with the success, that it would still be relegated to, a cult classic, cult status. What I want to say, though, is that I actually watched this movie for the first time for this
Give me your
podcast.
fresh take.
I had read the book when I was in high school.
Mm.
So I knew the book, which I thought was okay. I'm not the biggest fan of Chuck Palahniuk personally. I like his writing style, but I think there's a point in his career where the types of stories he tells switches. He goes from like just crazy transgressive books to like horror stories, and I don't really care for that too much. So definitely his earlier stuff like Invisible Monsters, Survivor, and Fight Club, all good books. Um, but the reputation of this film for a very long time turned me off to it.
Hmm.
The fact that so many people loved it without seemingly really understanding it um, really made me uninterested in watching it. It had a bit of that Watchmen effect, you know. You know how in the in Watchmen everyone loves Rorschach,
Yeah.
but he was written to be a despicable character who you're supposed to hate. I had a bit of that relationship with Fight Club. I'm like, everyone loves Fight Club because they love Tyler Durden and they love Brad Pitt, but you're not supposed to like him. Like, why don't people understand the point of this? Maybe it was because I read the book, and so I like already kind of I knew what Palahniuk's intention was. It was just a matter of how did David Fincher turn it around. So going into this movie, I already basically had all my thoughts about it in order. I was really just paying attention to the directing and the storytelling. And this movie, I think, had much more CGI in it than his previous three movies. And I still want to say Panic Room is really where it begins, but I think for what we know of David Fincher, even more so than Seven, I think this movie really has the best definitive version of his visual style that we end up seeing in movies like Social Network.
Yeah, it is unapologetically controversial and dirty
Yeah,
and gritty.
seriously.
And
Yeah.
it's supposed to be, right? It's this kind of
Mhm.
commentary on Project X or Generation X, Project X, Generation X, and their kind of angsty behavior towards their parents and kind of just society and corporation in general. And I think
Yeah.
the character of Tyler Durden represents that so well. And the narrator, Edward Norton, is the guy who just kind of goes along with it. And I think this is another example of foils. Da da da. It's almost
Yep.
like this
There
is
we go, the dichotomy.
it's almost like a
Like
directing
a thing
technique
that
of his.
he likes. Yeah. Author appeal right there.
um, but yeah, that this is why this movie has been such a long mainstay. Is because it's so. It feels like the first movie that is very anti mainstream. I mean, this is
Well,
smack dab in the era of grunge music. So we had the grunge
yeah,
music
seriously.
era as well as movies like this coming out that
Yeah.
really embodied that generation.
Yeah, that generation and that attitude. I think also part of the appeal of this movie too is that because it's very anti-capitalist, that attitude just doesn't go away, especially nowadays. Jesus Christ. Um, so for sure, I think that that's part of really the appeal of this movie is that it's always going to find its audience with particularly young people and young men, for example. No other movie, I think, gets brought up in a conversation about masculinity than Fight Club, which is really what it's a movie about as well. And I know Pollock has on record just said that that's partially what it's about. Is it's about first off consumerism because you have all the anti-capitalism in it, all the anti-corporate, blue collar stuff. Um, and then also a movie about masculinity because you have the Fight Club itself and what that means for men. I mean, this movie outright tells you what it's about, you know? The scene where they're talking about Fight Club and they're like, we control the world. We wash your dishes, we fill your gas tank, we, clean your windows. But this is what we want. We want this free world without the consumerism, without the price tags, where we can just be our crazy selves. That's literally the movie saying, "Hey, idiots, this is what the movie's about." Are you paying attention yet?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Which I also think, when it comes to why this movie is so loved by people in film school, it's because there's just a lot to talk about with it.
Yeah.
You have the anti-capitalist stuff. You have the masculinity stuff. You have David Fincher's directing and, the CGI. And you have Brad Pitt and Tyler Durden. And, everyone loves the spoiler of the fact that they're the same people and, what have you. What have you. But yeah, no.
Did you know that the characters were the same person before you watched this? Well, I guess you read the book.
Yeah, I read.
Did that twist? So let me ask you this: did that work better for you in the film versus the movie, or vice versa?
I knew before I even read the book.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, so because that's the thing, Fight Club has just always been such a cultural footprint that even without even really knowing what this movie was about, it's kind of like Seven. You don't really know most people know the spoiler of Seven without even knowing what the movie's about.
Yeah.
People know that they're the same person without even knowing what Fight Club is about. And in a weird way, this movie changes what it's about, at different points. It begins being about Fight Club, and then it changes almost entirely into its anti-capitalist moraling and messaging. But nonetheless, yeah. I still think the reveal works better in the movie because it's visual.
Mm-hmm.
Those moments where you see Edward Norton, punching himself and pulling himself down the stairs, and that works so much better in the movie. I think Pollinuk actually admitted that he liked the ending to the movie better than the book because they're different, but he likes the movie ending better. Okay, Let me ask you this.
Ask me.
This movie was in your top 10 list, correct? If I'm not mistaken.
Honorable mention.
It was an honorable mention. When did you first see this movie, and why is it in your top 10 list? What do you like about it?
So I first saw this movie in 2000 and sophomore year. No, freshman year actually. I had just gotten it for Christmas, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll watch it."
Not bad. Quite a Christmas gift. How ironic an anti-capitalist
it was like
movie at Christmas.
It was just like a collection of movies, and this was one of the ones that was in it.
Okay.
But excuse me, I had to yawn. I think a lot of it is just, you mentioned it earlier, there's just a lot of depth with this movie. And I think it's a very rewatchable movie, specifically if even if you do know the twist.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, I think I said that was one of the caveats for why I regard movies so high is, can I rewatch them and can I get the same emotion from them? Like that scene when they're in the hotel room and Edward Norton's figures out that he's Tyler Durden and he's all, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have lost cabin pressure." I'm like, oh man, that's really smart. That's really cool, and that kind of gave me chills a little bit. This character learning who he really is as a person. I mean, that ending shot is one of the most iconic shots in all of film history, and I think I remember I was rewatching it recently, and when that scene came up, I just kind of put everything down and just let myself get grossed into it. I know I made fun that every filmmaker has this in their top 15, but Even though I know it's probably in my top 15. But I just think
Mm.
that depth and that this is a movie that also was a was a movie of its time and really engrossed in that Generation X angst. Um,
There you go.
it embodies that. It embodies that era so well.
Mm.
Um, hasn't aged the best per se.
No, no.
Um, and it's very very provocative. Definitely don't recommend showing this to any kids until they're like 26. um, but yeah, yeah. For me, this one's in
Okay,
the A tier
so
for sure.
yeah, for sure, for me as well. So what I will say about this movie too is how it's really a testament to the idea that if you're gonna do something provocative or bold or brash or out there, you really just have to commit to it. And this movie commits to it 100% because I think when we talk about this movie being quote unquote provocative or in your face, it's not just the content of the movie itself. It's not just the fighting or the messaging in the film. It's the fact that they break the fourth wall or they purposely splice penises into the film for a
Mhm.
single frame multiple times, or they do those weird editing tricks where, the scene where Brad Pitt looks at the camera and then the film stock starts shaking and showing itself. All those little moments like that. This movie really just like stares you down, in that
Yeah,
kind of way.
the president of Fox of 20th Century Fox didn't like a lot of the stuff that was in this movie. Um,
Yeah.
there was an original scene where Marla, the Helena Bonham Carter character, she says, "I want to have your abortion," and the
They had to
president of
change it.
20th Century Fox president was like, "No, you guys got to change this." And David Fincher was like, "All right, but whatever I pick next, we have to, we have to keep." It's like, "Well, I'll change
Yeah.
it," and she's like, "This is such a stupid agreement," but she's like, "Yeah, okay." It's like,
That's
okay.
hilarious.
And the new line is, "I haven't been fucked like that since grade school." It's like, that's 10 times worse. But it's stuff like that, the acid burning scene is so,
Yeah.
I don't think we've seen something that provocative in a movie since. To that level where it's just a character getting
Mm.
burned chemically for a non-horror,
Jeez.
non-thriller movie. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I
yeah,
mean, hey, what I think is also part of the legacy of this movie and what makes it so, why it sticks around so much is once again David Fincher getting amazing performances out of all of his actors,
yeah,
particularly Edward Norton for me, um, for sure. I think even before I saw this movie, I felt like a weird connection and relatability to Edward Norton's character. Um, Maybe it's just because of Edward Norton himself, because I just like him as an actor. Um, but yeah, no, for sure. I think that he just. This is definitely one of those movies where the actors kind of just embody the role, like that character, Jack, or narrator, or whatever you call them, could not have been any other actor but Edward Norton in a weird way, Like when you think about it, you don't feel like you can imagine Tyler Durden as anyone but Brad Pitt.
yeah, because he's so charismatic and he's so flamboyant, and that's kind of
Yeah.
Brad Pitt's whole thing as an actor is being a charismatic, flamboyant character as a smooth talker. Um, and Edward Norton is more chillaxed, and it kind of just brings out the best of what they do.
Mm-hmm. For sure. For sure. Now, what don't you like about this movie?
Oof. Um. Well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't.
Isn't that what's interesting? It's such a in your face, down your throat, you know, kind of movie. It wants to piss you off. It wants to be provocative and
And you can't.
controversial. That in a weird way, you can't help
Yeah.
but you kind of just like it for that.
It takes a lot of stones to kind of just be like, I'm gonna make this movie. I'm gonna make the movie I want to make. And if you don't like it,
Yeah.
go f yourself. And that's basically what David Fincher is telling us. And it,
Yeah.
I don't know if any other,
really kind of
I don't know if any other director would do that. Because even Scorsese, who makes brash and
in your
provocative
face
films,
movies. Yeah.
he doesn't go this far. I don't think any of his characters are starting a terrorist cell and burning their hands with chemicals and
The only person,
saying stuff like I haven't been screwed like that since middle school. Like none of his
I
characters say
think
stuff like that.
the director who I think comes to mind is Stanley Kubrick, just because he often would make movies about transgressive topics like Lolita or A Clockwork Orange.
Mm-hmm.
But he probably would not have made a movie that looked, his movie would have been vastly different from the David Fincher's version. But this is a podcast about David Fincher. So about what he does as a director in this movie. I think for me, the standout is really the CGI.
Yeah.
Those moments of, especially the opening credits. I prefer this opening credits to, what's it called? 7, where it starts at the molecule and then it turns into the gun. That's just cool. I just like stuff like that. That's just me personally, but I just like stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
For sure, for sure. I think for me, if I had any criticism about this movie, it would be that in our day and age and the conversation about the role of masculinity that I think a lot of people are having, it doesn't age very well. It definitely, it's understandable why a lot of fascists have attached themselves to this movie and the Tyler Durden character, or at least why a lot of people who attach themselves to the Tyler Durden character turned into fascists in real life. In that regard, I don't think it aged.
You're telling me
stellarly.
You're telling me Benito Mussolini was a big Fight Club fan?
He was a big Fight Club fan, man. You should have seen his political prisoners. They loved Fight Club for sure. But other than that, and part of that is because this movie really is just a product of its time. And Chuck Palahniuk was doing that on purpose. He was saying what's missing with masculinity, and then he wrote that book. And a lot of men attached themselves to it. And just so happened that it was easily manipulated by fascism, but nonetheless. Because literally the idea that, you have a role to play in society and you have to fulfill that role and, be the strongest you can be and defeat all your opponents. That's like the core tenets of fascism. And what can you do? But nonetheless, I think that that would be my only complaint with the movie, is that it just hasn't aged well. I mean, there are parts of it that I understand. I think really, despite the fact that the way this movie frames its characters' ideas has not aged well, what will always keep this movie going and what will always give this movie fans is, first off, the anti-capitalism stuff, because poor college kids eat that up, myself included. And
Hashtag woke.
To the actual movie-going audience of normal people, the twists and turns that this movie takes. The relationship between Tyler Durden and Edward Norton. you know, everyone knows that they're the same person. But how it plays out in the movie is so much better than just knowing the twist itself. That it's like the scene where Edward Norton is like, every time he punches himself or he's like walking around the places and he's like, "Who am I? Do you know who I am? What's my name?" And they're like, "Is this a test?" I love that. That whole sequence was so great to me. I love that part so much. What do you think about Marla?
Such a brash character. I mean, it's a very Helena Bonham Carter character. She
Now,
plays
do
this
you
weird.
say that because she does the role so well that
Yes.
similarly you can't imagine someone else playing that
Well,
role?
it's also characters that are right up her alley. These weird, kooky,
Yeah,
eclectic.
true.
Something's wrong with them.
Tim
and they're-
Burton-esque.
Yeah. There's something wrong. There's definitely some childhood trauma there.
Yeah, seriously, with a line like
with her
that.
with her characters, not with her. You know, I'm not speaking on her.
No. Her only real life trauma is being married to Tim Burton.
Are they still married? Is that a thing still?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, they divorced a while ago.
Okay.
I believe so.
Yeah, this is one of her more iconic roles. It's like a more sane version of Bellatrix Lestrange. Which is kind of funny saying out loud because it feels like if you put Bellatrix in this movie, it feels like she would fit right in. Yeah, actually, I like the character of Marla, kind of in that, how she treats the dual Tyler characters differently in it. Watching it the first time, you're like, man, why do these people not like each other? And then you actually know the twist, and you're like, oh, they do like each other. It's just
they just don't know it.
Yeah. So, I like her. Do you not like her? Is that why you posed the question to me?
Partially. I think because in the book it's much more explicit that she's just there as well. Actually, what's funny too is in the book she's there to set up the trigger between him creating the Tyler Durden character, but in the book it's never really explicit whether she's real or not. And what's interesting is I thought the movie was going to be the same way. Right up until towards the end, I was like, okay, in the book, it's never revealed whether or not she's also a part of his dissociative identity disorder or whether she's a real person. But in the movie, it's much more explicit that she's a real person. Because they do those things where, they're like, Tyler Durden says, don't talk to her about me or don't have us in the same room together.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's because she's also part of his, identity disorder. And then it's just like, no, it's just because Tyler Durden is the only one. And I'm like, I kind of, because what's interesting is because I think Chuck Palahniuk did this on purpose. He purposely made her just a kind of bland their female character. She's just kind of a plot device in the book. But that was on purpose because it plays into the mystery of whether or not she's also a split personality for Edward Norton. In the book, that is. Whereas in the movie, they keep a part of her they just keep the plot device part and they make her a real person. And I still would have preferred it if it was a little bit more ambiguous what her, we know her role is she's just there to be a plot device. But whether or not she was a plot device for Edward Norton or a plot device for the story, you know the difference?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
That's partially what I didn't like about the movie. Yeah, personally.
That's fair.
Especially because it's a movie about masculinity. It makes sense that there wouldn't be many female characters in it, but for the one female character in it to still just be there for the sake of the male characters. I was like, yeah, this is a bit of a product for its time. Just personally. Yeah.
So is the book better than the movie?
I would honestly probably, you know what? Oh man, what's funny too is even before we chose this topic for the podcast, even before we chose to talk about David Fincher, I was thinking about rereading the book. So I would, for now though, I would say the movie is probably better, just because actually seeing the relationship between Tyler Durden and Edward Norton, the way that they interact, and also the way in which it's just one person doing it to himself was much more interesting than I remember the book being. Then again, I read the book when I was in high school and I didn't really, understand certain elements of it that I absolutely would now as an older adult. So there's that to play into it, personally. Okay. In terms of moments in this film I like, and this is a good thing with David Fincher, how he uses CGI for very subtle ways. David Fincher uses CGI in a very nuanced way. He doesn't do big things with it. He's not doing superhero movies. A good example of this is the scene where Edward Norton character is flipping through an IKEA magazine, and it goes into a room, and then there's items get added into the room, and it tells you the price and the name. And then it's revealed that that's just his apartment that he was walking through, and it's all done in one take. And I'm just like, that's the kind of stuff that David Fincher.
I really like that. For. Yeah, that was really
those really subtle scene transitions for sure.
Super smart and great storytelling visually.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, out of the four that are in the 90s. Which one is your favorite?
Fight Club would probably be my favorite. Fight Club, and then Seven is a close second. They're both in the A category for me. Mm-hmm. I would then say The Game, and then Alien 3.
I would agree.
The Game is also probably in the C tier. Yeah, for sure. But categorizing this era overall for David Fincher as a director, I think he knew what kind of movies he wanted to make. He knew the visual style he had. Because right out the gate, even in Alien 3, there are some moments of it. But really from 7 onwards, it's there. It's almost fully formed. Maybe it becomes stronger in his later films. I can think of the one specific film where I think it's just a masterpiece in, David Fincher's style, like his magnum opus, I would say.
Is it The Curious Case of Benjamin
Martin? For sure. No. But, well, maybe. No, not at all. But no, definitely throughout this decade, I think David Fincher really, in a weird way, despite the fact that these movies are his own movies, they have his trademarks, they have his lighting, his camera motion, the use of CGI that we're used to. I still feel like he was just finding his feet. He didn't really have his sea legs yet at this point.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
When we talk about the 2000s, that's really where I feel like we're going to see
him come into his own.
Him really come to understand his own style, for sure. But there are those moments here and there in movies like Seven and Fight Club where I'm like, yeah, this is... No one else could have directed this movie like this. Only David Fincher could have. And he understands that. For sure. I think definitely, here's the big thing I would say too. If David Fincher made Fight Club today, it would look different. There would be differences for sure.
Yeah.
Even with Seven. I feel like even directors like Christopher Nolan, I feel like if Christopher Nolan directed Memento today, it would pretty much look exactly the same, you know? Um, but I think with Fincher being as meticulous, as detail oriented, and as visually oriented as he is, I definitely think while these movies are good, while they're well directed movies, um, he himself has matured
Since
in
then.
subtle ways. Yeah, but for sure, he's definitely gotten better. hmm I would say.
Yeah, his peak isn't
And
until 2010s, I would say.
yeah, maybe. Maybe. You know, David Fincher is one of those directors where he definitely has more than one magnum opus. I would say,
Lots of peaks and lots
in
of
my opinion.
lots of yeah. He's like a mountain range.
Well, you know what's interesting too is that he has gone on record saying that. At least I remember an old interview from him where he said that he doesn't really care about the perfect filmography. Every director he feels nowadays wants every movie they make to be perfect, and he's just okay with a movie just being entertaining. If it just grabs your attention, if it just keeps you in the theater, he's fine with it. Might contradict the fact that he ended up disowning 2 films, but nevertheless. But for sure. That's how I feel about him in the 90s. He has 2 good movies, he has 2 okay movies. He's just getting started.
He's laying the foundation for what's to come. Which,
yeah, for sure.
looking ahead next week, we got Panic Room, Zodiac, and wow, I can't believe I forgot it. I just pulled it up.
Benjamin Button. The
Benjamin
Curious Case
Button.
of Benjamin Button.
Let me
My
restart that.
guy.
We got Panic Room, Zodiac, and The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. I'm actually really excited to get into Zodiac. A lot of movies of David Fincher's I haven't seen. A lot of movies I didn't even know he directed. And I think Zodiac's the one where I'm like, oh, this is the one I'm most excited to watch for the first time.
Nice. You haven't watched it yet? Oh
No,
man.
no, dude, I'm telling
excited.
you, David Fincher. I didn't know he directed a lot of movies. I know about Zodiac, but I didn't know it was a Fincher movie.
Okay. If you're watching it for the first time, then man, I am excited to talk about that. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Any last closing remarks? I think we both agree. A very solid foundation for what's to come, but not his best.
Yeah. You know what's funny too is I would agree with that. Even with both Seven, you know what's interesting too? I'll say this. His most commercially well-known films, both Seven and Fight Club. I think those 2 films, to most people, they know those movies because they're almost like they're both cultural touchstones. You know,
Yeah.
the What's in the Box and the
First
Fight
rule
Club in
of
general.
Fight Club: don't talk
yeah,
about
first
Fight
rule of
Club.
Fight Club. Man, we went the entire podcast not mentioning the rules, and then you just had to mention the rules. What the heck are you doing, my guy?
We broke all the rules today.
You broke the first 2 rules of Fight Club. But what's interesting is despite the fact that those 2 movies are probably his most commercially successful movies, or at least culturally popular, I think you would agree with me. They're not his best movies.
No.
Which just goes to show how much better he becomes at directing, how much more he learns. And I think when we get to those 2 movies, at least for me, like I said, he has more than one magnum opus for sure. So
He has magnum opuses.
I know what those 2 are. I know what those 2 masterpieces are, but that's for you to find out.
It's Mank and the girl with the dragon tattoo, right?
It's Benjamin Button and Benjamin Button 2, Electric Boogaloo.
It's actually Alien 3, 2.
Yeah, Alien 3, the sequel. For sure.
Oh man. All right. Well, if we got nothing else to
All right.
say, let's get on out of here. I'm
All right.
Isaac. That was James. This was David Fincher. Part 1 of 3. Tune in next week. Breaking down Panic Room, Zodiac, Benjamin Button. Till then, have a good weekend. Stay cold.